Welcome to the quiet charm of the Cotswolds, where the teapots never cool and the secrets never quite stay buried. We'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Do tell us in the comments below. And if these cozy mysteries keep you company in the evenings, do subscribe. It helps us brew up the next case for you. Now then, shall we begin? The drizzle had that stubborn, lingering quality peculiar to early spring in the Cotswolds, a sort of damp insistence that reminded Agatha Raisin she really should have stayed at home. But staying at home had lost its appeal. She'd already reorganized her spice rack twice, frightened the cats with the hoover, and stared so long at her reflection that even she had to admit the boredom was becoming visible. So she arrived at the Carsely Parish Hall armed with a tartan umbrella, a sense of mission, and an expression that announced she was doing the village a favour. The Sewing Circle met every Tuesday afternoon, a gathering of creative ladies whose enthusiasm for stitching was only rivalled by their talent for gossip. Agatha had decided it was high time they modernised their annual charity bazaar. Fewer doilies, more flair. The hall smelled faintly of damp wool and lemon biscuits. Long tables had been laid with fabric, teacups, and the sort of earnest cheer that gave Agatha hives. Mrs. Dimmock, who chaired the sewing circle with the pious authority of a headmistress, bustled up in a floral blouse that could have doubled as camouflage in a rose garden. "Mrs. Raisin, how lovely you could join us. We're stitching for the Easter Bazaar today. Tea cozies and lavender sachets. I do hope you brought your thimble." "I brought a checkbook," said Agatha, hanging up her Mac. "It saves time." Several heads turned. Only Mrs. Blocksby smiled, her vicar's wife's serenity undented. Clarissa Trent, the newcomer, was already installed at the far end of the table, slim, composed, and wearing a cashmere twinset the colour of champagne. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of letting anyone else sew my hems," she said lightly to Vera Lyle, who was nervously sorting ribbons. "You can always tell shop-bought stitches. They lack soul." Agatha's eyebrows twitched. "I'll have you know, my skirt came from a boutique in Broadway." Clarissa's smile had the soft cruelty of velvet. "Ah, yes, dear. Those ready-mades can be so convenient." Mrs. Dimmock clucked for peace. Now, ladies, let's not prick each other before we've threaded our needles." Vera tittered uncertainly. Agatha sat, her pride throbbing like a bruised toe. She took up a needle, stabbed the fabric with more force than necessary, and muttered something unprintable under her breath. For half an hour the room buzzed with the steady rhythm of gossip and gossipers. Mrs. Dimmock discussed raffle prizes, Vera whispered about the vicar's new housekeeper, and Clarissa drifted through it all like a model on a village catwalk. When the treasurer's notebook appeared, Mrs. Dimmock closed it briskly. "Figures after tea," she said. "They're in a muddle." Agatha's attempt to propose new ideas, colour-coordinated displays, a proper publicity leaflet, perhaps even a social media page, was met with the collective horror reserved for heresy. "We've always done it this way," declared Mrs. Dimmock. "Yes, and it's always been dull," Agatha retorted. The word dull caused a collective intake of breath. Even the teapot seemed to pause mid-pour. Clarissa smiled sweetly. "Perhaps Mrs. Raisin would like to design the posters. She has such bold taste." It was not meant as a compliment. Agatha was about to deliver a verbal broadside when Vera shrieked, "My silk's gone! The blue one! It was right here!" Everyone looked up. Mrs. Dimmock began searching under the table. "Are you sure, dear? Perhaps it slipped." "I tell you, it's gone." Clarissa pursed her lips. "How careless. Blue silk's terribly dear." The tension was thick enough to darn. Agatha, unwilling to be accused, held up her hands. "Don't look at me. I wouldn't know what to do with it, unless I could strangle someone with it." There was an awkward titter, mostly from Vera herself. The missing silk was eventually declared temporarily misplaced, though not before Mrs. Dimmock suggested everyone keep a closer eye on their materials. By the time tea was served, the atmosphere was stitched with frost. "Clarissa takes china black, no sugar," Mrs. Dimmock announced, pouring with practised certainty. Agatha drank hers black and scalding, refusing cake out of sheer principle. Clarissa accepted a second slice with the grace of a duchess feeding pigeons. When at last the meeting dispersed, Mrs. Blocksby walked out with Agatha, sheltering both under her umbrella. "You know, Agatha, you might have frightened them a little," she said kindly. "Good," said Agatha. "They could use a bit of fright. I've seen more imagination in a packet of napkins." "Clarissa does seem rather Particular, Mrs. Bloxby ventured. Particular? She's poisonous. Mrs. Bloxby smiled. Still, she does have a knack for charm. I dare say even you could get along if you tried. Agatha snorted. If charm's what that was, I'll take sarcasm. They parted at the vicarage gate. The drizzle had settled into a steady downpour by the time Agatha trudged home, her shoes making damp protests. She reached her cottage, shrugged off the coat, and dropped her sewing kit onto the kitchen table like evidence of a crime. The cats, Hodge and Boswell, looked unimpressed. Don't smirk, she told them. You'd be sour too if you'd spent 2 hours with women who think crochet is a personality. She put the kettle on and replayed Clarissa's barbed remarks in her head, each one pricking her pride anew. It wasn't that she minded criticism. She rather enjoyed a good fight. But Clarissa's tone had carried that special brand of superiority Agatha loathed, the kind that suggested money, confidence, and perfectly cut clothes. Sewing circle, she muttered aloud. More like stitch and bitch. The kettle whistled its agreement. As she poured her tea, she recalled the odd flicker of movement she'd seen earlier. A small blue car parked outside the vicarage. The driver slumped low behind the wheel. It had looked familiar. Clarissa's, perhaps. Odd time to linger in the rain. Agatha peered through her sitting-room window, the lane glistening under the street lamp. Only puddles reflected back, and the faint smell of wet earth drifted in when she cracked the sash. Still, her curiosity prickled. Clarissa hadn't struck her as the sort to idle alone on village roads. She made a mental note to ask Bill Wong whether the newcomer had a valid parking permit, or a valid reason for being so blasted smug. By 9:30, the rain was hammering against the glass. Agatha sat at her computer and, in a fit of defiance, searched for modern charity bazaar ideas. Pinterest, she decided, was more cutthroat than any village committee. After 10 minutes of floral bunting and pastel cupcakes, she slammed the lid down and switched on the telly. The cats had claimed the sofa. She wedged herself between them, glowering. The parish hall scene replayed itself in her mind with all the satisfaction of a splinter. Perhaps she had overreacted, but then again, who could resist when provoked by that smug cow? Mrs. Bloxby's voice echoed gently in memory. You might have frightened them a little. Agatha sighed. Let them be frightened. Keeps the blood flowing. Outside, the vicarage light flickered out, leaving the lane in silence. Agatha stretched, yawned, and decided she would return to the sewing circle next week after all, if only to prove she could outstitch, outcharm, and outlast every last one of them. After all, it wasn't curiosity that drew her back to conflicts like these. It was the delicious promise of trouble, and Agatha Raisin never could resist that particular thread. The next morning brought one of those pale Cotswold dawns that looked as though it had been washed too many times. Mist clung to the hedgerows, and the puddles in Carsely Lane gleamed like old pewter. Agatha Raisin, wrapped in her dressing gown, stood at the window of her cottage sipping coffee, feeling half triumphant and half irritated. She had sworn she would not give Clarissa Trent another thought, yet here she was, replaying every word of yesterday's sewing circle fiasco. That simpering smile, those pointed little remarks about handmade quality. Agatha could practically hear her even now, until the telephone rang, cutting through her fuming. "Aggie, darling," came Roy Silver's effervescent voice, "London's abuzz with your little sewing scandal." "What scandal?" said Agatha sharply, "unless you count bad taste and gossip as crimes." "Apparently your glamorous new friend, Clarissa Trent, may not be the haute couture prodigy she claims. Someone called my editor. Seems her designer client list was as real as a politician's promise. I told him I'd ring the countryside correspondent immediately. And here I am." Agatha gave a snort. "You'll do no such thing. This is Carsely, not Fleet Street. We don't destroy reputations before breakfast." "Oh, come on, Aggie. Nothing perks up a slow news day like exposed fraud and floral prints. I'm popping down for colour. We'll make a feature of it. From catwalk to cross-stitch." She slammed the receiver down before he could finish. Roy's visits had a way of making even quiet scandals sound like carnival parades. Still, she couldn't help a small smile. Clarissa a fraud. That would explain a lot. Her musings were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Bill Wong, looking half amused and half resigned, as he usually did when visiting Agatha unannounced. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. Mind if I step in?" You're already halfway in, so no, I suppose not. Coffee? Tea, if you've got it. As she busied herself with the kettle, Bill leaned against the counter. I hear things got lively at the sewing circle yesterday. Only if you find rudeness lively. Clarissa Trent tried to humiliate me, and Mrs. Dimmock nearly sprained a moral fibre trying to keep the peace. Bill smiled. I'm just saying, leave them to it. Carsely thrives on harmless gossip, but you've a knack for turning harmless into homicide. That's unkind, she said, handing him his tea. Just accurate, he replied mildly. Let it simmer, Agatha. Don't go sleuthing for trouble this time. But his warning only sharpened her resolve. By that afternoon, she'd already telephoned Mrs. Bloxby for confirmation of the rumours and arranged to drop in at the next meeting, purely for moral support, of course. When evening came, the parish hall smelled faintly of polish and lavender. The tables cleared for the sewing circle's renewed efforts. Rain ticked against the windows like a soft metronome. Agatha, having dressed with care, black turtleneck, gold brooch, faint whiff of Chanel, entered as though she were there to take charge of an emergency. Mrs. Raisin, said Mrs. Dimmock in that too bright tone of false welcome, how good of you to rejoin us. We're just finishing the patchwork quilts for the charity raffle. Agatha smiled. Lovely. I'll make sure they're square. Not everyone's corners are equal. That remark earned her a few tight smiles. Clarissa, conspicuously absent, had apparently sent word she was indisposed. Vera Lyle, pale but determined, was trimming fabric with her dainty silver scissors, the only item she seemed to take pride in. You're being talked about, you know, Vera whispered as Agatha sat beside her. Clarissa's client list, all nonsense. Said she worked for the House of Brightwell. My sister's a seamstress there. Never heard of her. Ha! So much for haute couture, Agatha murmured. I expect she stitched more lies than seams. Ladies, interrupted Mrs. Dimmock, let's avoid gossip. Charity work is best done with Christian temper. Agatha bit back the retort that came to mind. She'd learned, barely, that open warfare at these gatherings only strengthened the enemy. As the evening wore on, the room grew warm and heavy with the scent of tea and wool. Conversation meandered from hems to husbands to the weather, each topic stitched through with speculation about Clarissa's mysterious past. Agatha noticed that Vera seemed oddly distracted, patting her pockets as though searching for something. Lost your thread? Agatha asked. Worse, said Vera. My scissors, they were here a moment ago. Everyone paused. Then Mrs. Dimmock pointed to the table. Those there, surely. Vera picked them up and gasped. These aren't mine. Mine were silver-handled, a gift from my aunt. These are cheap rubbish. The room rippled with murmurs. Mrs. Dimmock frowned. Really, Vera, who would want your scissors? Someone who wants to spite me, Vera said tremulously. Oh, don't be dramatic, said Agatha. But privately she was intrigued. The missing silk yesterday, now the switched scissors. Someone in this group had a petty streak. The sound of the door opening drew all eyes. Charles Fraith sauntered in, immaculate as ever, carrying a paper bag from the bakery. Ladies, he announced, I come bearing sustenance, Eccles cakes, warm and sinful. I'm told this is where the sharpest tongues in Carsely meet. And apparently the sharpest needles, Agatha said dryly. You're trespassing on sacred territory, Charles. Oh, I like to live dangerously, he replied, pulling up a chair beside her. Besides, Bill Wong told me you were playing peacekeeper. I had to see that. If you're here to gloat, I'll use Vera's spare scissors on you. Assuming they're not counterfeit, he said with a grin. A few of the ladies chuckled, though Mrs. Dimmock's lips thinned. Agatha leaned over and jabbed him lightly in the arm with her pincushion. Ow! What was that for? For being smug. Then I'll be covered in holes by the end of the night. Their banter, though light, eased the tension until Vera suddenly gave a faint gasp. She slumped forward in her chair, her hand clutching her finger. Oh, heavens, cried Mrs. Dimmock. Vera, Agatha knelt beside her, heart pounding. What happened? The needle. I pricked myself. It's dark, tarnished. It's not mine. Sure enough, the needle glinted darkly in the lamplight, its point corroded. Charles fetched a glass of water while Mrs. Bloxby, ever composed, dabbed Vera's hand with a handkerchief. We'd best take her to the surgery, Mrs. Bloxby said calmly. Best let Dr. Stevens see to it. Agatha felt a prickle at the back of her neck. A missing silk, switched scissors, and now a planted, rusty needle. Someone in this genteel circle had a cruel sense of mischief. "Could have been an accident," murmured Charles. "And pigs could embroider," Agatha replied. As Vera was escorted out, the room dissolved into nervous chatter. Mrs. Dimmock suggested a prayer, though her voice trembled more from curiosity than faith. Agatha stayed behind to tidy, her mind whirring. The air seemed to hum with unspoken hostilities, envy, pretense, small vanities dressed as virtue, the very stuff that made village life tolerable and dangerous in equal measure. "You're enjoying this," Charles said softly. She glanced at him. "What makes you say that?" "You get that look, the one that says, 'Something's afoot, and I'll find out even if it kills me.'" Agatha smiled faintly. "Perhaps I just hate mysteries that involve cheap scissors." He laughed, slipping on his coat. "Just don't start interrogating parish ladies like a Scotland Yard inspector. Bill's already nervous." "Bill can wait. I've a feeling there's more sewing than charity going on here." As she locked the hall behind her, the mist had thickened into a silvery fog. Agatha stood for a moment, listening to the muffled hush of Carsley's lanes. A cat darted across the green, its eyes twin sparks in the gloom. She turned toward home, her mind still threading through the evening's events. Clarissa's fabricated glamour, Vera's fear, the spiteful sabotage, all part of some unseen pattern. By the time she reached her gate, a drop of rain caught her cheek. She brushed it away impatiently, muttering, "Rusty needles, cheap scissors, what next, poisoned tea?" Then she stopped short. "Oh no," she said softly to herself, "don't give them ideas." Morning light broke reluctantly over Carsely, as though the sun itself doubted the village deserved the effort. Agatha Raisin stood in her kitchen, staring at her toast with deep suspicion. Even the marmalade seemed judgmental. She had not slept well. The image of Vera Lyle's fainting spell replayed itself in her mind like an irritating advert. Word had spread overnight, of course. By 8:30, Mrs. Freeman from the post office had telephoned to check on poor Vera, and by 9 the same story had mutated into whispers that someone had deliberately planted the rusty needle. Carsely was at its best when morally outraged, and by the time Agatha arrived at the high street for groceries, she could feel the villagers' eyes following her as if she'd embroidered the crime herself. At the butcher's, Fred Jessup greeted her with a grin that belonged in a gossip column. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. Heard your sewing circle's turned deadly. What's next? Crochet carnage?" Agatha gave him her frostiest smile. "Thank you, Fred. I'll have the lean mince and less commentary." By the time she returned home, her vanity was prickling. She wasn't about to let Clarissa Trent, smug, self-appointed couturier, drift about as if butter wouldn't melt. The woman's name had come up too often in too many stories, and Agatha intended to see for herself what sort of West End designer lived in a Cotswold cottage with suspiciously perfect curtains. She packed her handbag with the floral fabric Clarissa had lent her weeks earlier and set off down the lane, umbrella in hand. Clarissa's cottage was a picture postcard, honeystone walls, wisteria curling neatly around the door, not a weed in sight. Too immaculate, Agatha thought. No one who lived tidily was ever trustworthy. She knocked twice, firm, polite, no nonsense. No answer. She knocked again, louder. "Clarissa, it's Agatha Raisin. I've brought back your fabric, thought I'd save you the bother." Still silence. The air smelled faintly of rosemary, and something sharper, disinfectant perhaps. Agatha's curiosity outweighed her manners. She turned the latch and stepped inside. The door stood ajar, rain speckling the hall tiles. The first thing she noticed was the order. Everything gleamed, sewing machine polished, fabrics stacked by colour, ribbons aligned like soldiers. The second thing she noticed was the smell, chemical, medicinal, unpleasant. "Clarissa?" she called again, advancing toward the sitting room. "I know you're in here. Only a madwoman keeps house like this." No reply. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor as she rounded the corner into the sewing nook, and stopped. Clarissa Trent sat at her sewing table, head tilted oddly to one side, a cup beside her elbow, and a spool of thread rolling lazily on the floor as though it had dropped moments before. Agatha's throat tightened. "Clarissa?" She took a step closer, reached out a hand, and froze. The woman's skin had that unmistakable pallor that no cosmetic could disguise. "Oh, hell," muttered Agatha. Don't tell me I'm first on the scene again. For a moment she simply stood there, heart pounding. Then instinct took over. She backed out of the room, went to the hallway phone and dialed emergency services. Her voice was steady, too steady. Within 20 minutes, the small lane outside was a bustle of uniforms. Carsely hadn't seen so many police since the Great Cheese Festival disaster of 2009. Agatha gave her statement crisply, omitting only how she'd happened to wander in. Inspector Wilkes, a tall man with greying hair and the self-importance of a minor deity, arrived last, brushing rain from his coat. He looked at Agatha with the weary contempt reserved for repeat offenders of curiosity. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, "I might have known. You seem to have a knack for discovering bodies." "Hardly my fault people insist on dying inconveniently near me," said Agatha. Wilkes ignored that. He peered at the body, then at the cup on the table. "Preliminary impression, accidental poisoning, some household contamination near the tea," he muttered. "Domestic tragedy." Agatha's brow arched. "Accidental? In a house so spotless it could perform surgery?" "You'd be surprised what people mistake for cordial." "Not this one. Clarissa wouldn't have so much as chipped a nail without purpose." Wilkes turned to her with mild irritation. "Leave it to us, Mrs. Raisin. I'll take your contact details in case we need clarification, though I sincerely hope we don't." Agatha folded her arms. She was too careful. Look around, not a speck out of place, except that missing spool of thread. Someone tidied after themselves. Wilkes gave her a patronizing smile. "And you are an expert in forensic sewing, are you?" "No, but I recognize performance when I see it. That room's been staged, like a showroom window. And if you think that cup just happened to have residue of cleaning solvent, you're as gullible as Vera with her pinking shears." "Thank you for your theory," said Wilkes, writing nothing down. "Now, if you'll kindly leave my crime scene." "If this is domestic bliss," Agatha interrupted, "I'll keep my cats." She marched past him before he could answer, coat flaring. Outside, the drizzle had thickened into rain, the kind that made even the Cotswold stone look weary. She paused under her umbrella, looking back at the pretty cottage that now felt faintly sinister. The villagers were already gathering at a distance, necks craning. Gossip travelled faster than lightning in Carsely. Someone would soon say Agatha had quarrelled with Clarissa. Someone else would insist she'd discovered a murder weapon. By evening, she'd be accused of using arsenic in her scones. "Serves me right," she muttered. "Should have stuck to the crossword." She turned towards her home, but as she reached the corner, a familiar figure appeared. Bill Wong, raincoat buttoned, expression serious. "Agatha," he called, striding up. "I just heard. Clarissa Trent?" "Found her myself," she said grimly. "You're late. The vultures have already landed. Wilkes thinks she poisoned herself with detergent." Bill frowned. "Detergent? Apparently Carsely is now a hub for suicidal hygiene." "Don't start, Agatha. Let's wait for the lab results before you conjure conspiracies." "Lab results won't change the fact that her thread spool's missing." "Thread spool? Bright blue. I saw a spool roll, but its twin spot on the rack was empty. You'll see when you look." Bill sighed. "Please, for once, stay out of this. Wilkes isn't as patient as I am." Agatha studied him. There was genuine concern beneath the irritation, and something softer. "I'm not in it," she said. "I'm just observing." "You don't know how to just observe." "Nonsense. I'm perfectly capable of sitting quietly until I'm right." He gave a half smile. "Promise me you'll leave the investigating to us." "Of course," she said sweetly. He knew her too well to believe that. They walked a few paces together, umbrellas bobbing like mismatched wings. Carsely's fields stretched damp and green around them. Sheep huddled against the hedges. Bill talked of procedure, of evidence bags and statements. Agatha only half listened, her mind circling like a cat round a closed cupboard. A cleaning solvent, a missing spool, a cup too conveniently placed. When they reached her gate, Bill paused. "I'll let you know what the lab says, and Agatha—" "Yes?" "Don't try to prove Wilkes wrong just because you dislike him." "Bill, I dislike half of England. I don't make a hobby of proving them all wrong." "You could have fooled me," he said, smiling. As he walked off, Agatha lingered in the drizzle, her umbrella dripping steadily. Inside the cottage, the cats meowed for supper, indifferent to death or scandal. She hung up her coat and stood a moment in the quiet, the tick of the kitchen clock loud against the rain. Then she reached for the fabric she'd meant to return. Soft floral cotton, nothing remarkable. and noticed a faint thread caught at the edge. Blue, bright, unmistakable. Agatha held it up to the light, heart quickening. So Clarissa's spool wasn't the only one missing. Someone had come calling before her, and left in a hurry. "Accident, my foot," she murmured. Outside, thunder rumbled distantly over the hills, like gossip turning into certainty. A raw wind was sweeping across Carsely Green, flattening daffodils and scattering yesterday's newspapers like accusatory fingers. Agatha Raisin marched along the lane in her camel coat, the hem flapping at her knees. She had decided to interrogate the sewing circle one by one, not because the police had asked, but because, as she saw it, they'd made the fatal mistake of not asking her. Her first call was on Mrs. Dimmock, who opened her cottage door with the expression of someone forced to greet an unwanted cousin. "Mrs. Raisin, I hope you're not here to pry." "Of course not," said Agatha, stepping inside before an invitation could be denied. "Just checking on morale. The sewing circle can't dissolve every time someone dies, or we'd have no clubs left in this village." Mrs. Dimmock's sitting room smelled of lavender polish and righteousness. A photo of her late husband gazed down disapprovingly from the mantel. "I'll tell you this much," said Mrs. Dimmock, smoothing her skirt. "Clarissa was not a happy woman. Oh, she smiled, but there was something sly beneath it. She once said she had a gentleman admirer." Agatha perked up. "Did she say who?" "Certainly not, only that he was generous. The way she said it made me blush." "Nothing shocks you," Agatha said dryly. Mrs. Dimmock sniffed. "I'm not easily shocked, just properly appalled." Agatha thanked her and left before being drawn into a prayer. She crossed to Vera Lyle's cottage next, finding the woman hunched over her mending. Vera's scissors glinted faintly, the new cheap pair. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin," Vera said nervously, "I know what people are saying, but I didn't mean to faint the other night. I was dizzy, that's all." "No one blames you," said Agatha, taking the chair opposite. "I'm just trying to piece things together. Mrs. Dimmock mentioned Clarissa had a suitor." "If she did, he was no good. She once told me men like power more than people." Agatha considered that. "Did she ever get post here? You collect the circle's letters sometimes, don't you?" Vera hesitated. "Now and then, but I never opened any. She'd snap them out of my hand." "Oh," her eyes widened. "There was a thick one the Tuesday before she died. Fancy paper. Smelled of cigar smoke." Agatha leaned forward. "Cigar smoke?" Vera nodded eagerly. "You never forget that smell once you've dated a man who smoked them." "You've dated men who smoked cigars?" Vera looked scandalized. "Good heavens, no." Suppressing a smile, Agatha stood. "If you remember anything else, ring me. Or the police, but mostly me." By the time she reached her car, she'd drawn one conclusion. Clarissa's secrets were stitched as tightly as one of Mrs. Dimmock's quilts. Back home, she found a bright red sports car parked outside her gate and immediately knew who it belonged to. Roy Silver emerged, waving a folded newspaper like a banner. "Aggie," he cried, "darling, you'll die. The London fashion pages are all over this murder. They're calling it the Cotswold Couturier Mystery. It's fabulous." "A woman's dead, Roy." "Yes, but stylishly. Listen, there's a piece here about a scandal at the House of Brightwell. Someone's been flogging forged designs to overseas buyers and—" He flipped the page dramatically. "The stolen patterns were posted from Carsely." Agatha snatched the paper. "You're joking." "Do I ever?" "Constantly." Roy struck a pose. "But imagine it, Aggie. Clarissa running a village front for haute couture espionage. Those ghastly charity parcels could have been smuggling stolen designs. It's divine." "It's criminal," Agatha said, though the idea intrigued her. She folded the newspaper. "You'd better not blab that theory in the pub. The police already think I'm a nuisance." "Oh, Bill Wong," Roy scoffed. "He adores you, really." "He tolerates me like a bad rash," Roy grinned. "Speaking of rashes, let's drop in on him." "We're not dropping in on the police, Roy." But of course they did. Bill Wong was at the Carsely station sifting through reports. When they burst in, he groaned audibly. "Roy," he said, "I thought you were allergic to small towns." "I am, but mystery and fashion are irresistible," Agatha cut in briskly. "Bill, we need to know if Clarissa was linked to any design fraud cases. Roy's found evidence." "Roy's found gossip," Bill corrected. "London papers don't count as evidence." "Nevertheless," said Agatha, "the stolen designs were posted from Carsely. That's fact." "Coincidence," said Bill. "We've traced similar postmarks to half the county." And yet Clarissa gets envelopes stuffed with cash, Agatha pressed. You think that's normal? Bill rubbed his temple. Agatha, I can't share details, but unofficially, he paused, giving her a long look. We found her notebook. Some pages torn out, but one entry survived. Tuesday tea, final payment. Mean anything to you? Agatha's mind sparked. Tuesday was sewing circle night. She must have been expecting someone. Or paying them off, said Roy. Bill sighed. Just don't get in the way. We're arranging a proper search. Then at least let me know when you find out who drank that tea, Agatha said. If you're quiet for once, maybe I will. They left before Bill lost patience entirely. Outside, Roy was gleeful. Final payment. How wonderfully sinister. We should form a private detective agency. Raisin and Silver. Discretion optional. You wouldn't last a day without a press release, said Agatha. He pouted. You wound me. You'd recover faster with champagne. Now you're talking. They decamped to the village pub where Roy ordered Prosecco and Agatha, resolutely, gin and tonic. The bar was buzzing with gossip, mostly embroidered versions of the truth. Clarissa was in witness protection, one man said. Nonsense, another replied. She was MI5, my cousin's postman said so. Agatha sipped her drink, half amused, half exasperated. Roy leaned closer. You're loving this, Aggie. Don't be absurd. You've got that gleam again. The one that says Bill Wong can shout all he likes, but I'm going to solve it anyway. That gleam means indigestion, she said tartly. Still, as she walked home later, the words Tuesday tea, final payment echoed in her mind. Clarissa had died on a Wednesday. Whoever met her that Tuesday had reason enough to silence her by the next day. At her cottage, the cats greeted her with affronted yowls. She poured milk for them, and a second gin for herself, then settled in the armchair with the newspaper. The headline still glared, Fashion Fraud Rocks London House of Brightwell. Beneath it, a smaller paragraph caught her eye. A source claims internal sketches were traced to an anonymous supplier using rural postal drops. Rural postal drops, she murmured. Our charity shipments go to London. The idea unfurled in her mind like thread unspooling. The Sewing Circle posted parcels weekly, donated clothes, embroidery, tea cozies, all handled by volunteers. If someone slipped stolen designs between fabric layers, no one would notice. Agatha stared at the paper until the words blurred. Smuggling patterns through sewing kits, she said aloud. Clever, if idiotic. The doorbell rang, startling her. When she opened it, Bill stood there, rein on his collar. I thought you'd be asleep, he said. I'm middle-aged, not dead. What is it? We finished the search at Clarissa's. Found this. He handed over a small plastic bag. Inside lay a scrap of paper, torn from the notebook, with a faint ring of tea stain and the number 4.15 scribbled beside the words Tuesday tea. She noted the time, Agatha said. Whoever she met arrived at 4:15. Final payment, Agatha read softly. Either the London buyer or someone local paying to keep a secret. If Clarissa scheduled Dimmock for Tuesday, that would explain the panic. Or she brewed poison at 4:15, said Bill. They stood in silence. Rain hissed softly against the hedge. Foxglove takes hours to prepare, Agatha said. No, someone else made that tea. She was waiting. Bill's tone softened. Promise me, Aggie, you won't start knocking on doors again. Of course, she said innocently. He gave her a knowing look. That's what you said before you broke into a greenhouse. That was horticultural curiosity. He smiled despite himself. Good night, Agatha. When he'd gone, she placed the note on the mantel beside her gin. Outside, the wind had eased to a sigh, tugging faintly at the wisteria vines. She felt that familiar thrill, half dread, half purpose, that came only when danger brushed against curiosity. Tuesday tea, she murmured. Whoever you were, darling, you left crumbs all over Carsely. And as the clock chimed midnight, Agatha Raisin, armed with suspicion, vanity, and one badly behaved imagination, began to plan her next move. It was one of those crisp Cotswold mornings that tricked people into optimism. Sunlight winked on puddles, birds chirped with unconvincing cheer, and Agatha Raisin, clutching her handbag like a weapon, was already in a combative mood. She and Charles Fraith were parked outside the offices of Blakemore and Sykes, solicitors and commissioners for oaths. The brass plaque gleamed self-importantly as though proud to defend dull secrets. "We'll be lucky if they tell us anything," Charles said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Solicitors have a gift for saying nothing at professional rates." "They'll talk to me," said Agatha. "I can be persuasive." "You can be terrifying," he corrected. She ignored him, smoothing her hair before striding inside. The waiting room smelled faintly of old carpet and confidentiality. A young receptionist gave them a polite smile that suggested deep boredom. "Mr. Blakemore, please," Agatha announced. "Mrs. Raisin, Carsely. He'll want to see me." "Is he expecting you?" "He will once you tell him I'm here." 10 minutes later, they were shown into a narrow office lined with folders where Mr. Blakemore himself, a tall man with iron-grey hair and the air of someone allergic to enthusiasm, rose to greet them. "Mrs. Raisin, Sir Charles, how can I assist?" "We're looking into the late Miss Clarissa Trent," Agatha said. "We understand she received certain payments through your office." His face barely shifted. "I'm afraid client confidentiality." "She's dead," Agatha interrupted. "The only thing you're protecting now is your filing system." Charles winced but smiled. "Agatha means to say we'd appreciate any light you can shed. There are rumours about anonymous letters containing cash." Mr. Blakemore adjusted his spectacles. "Rumours are not my concern. I merely handle transactions." "Transactions," said Agatha. "So there were envelopes?" He hesitated. "I can confirm Miss Trent received occasional postal deliveries under the name Mrs. T. They contain notes of currency and were forwarded at her instruction." "Do you know who sent them?" "No, and I didn't ask. Payment is payment." "Did she ever seem anxious?" "Anxious," he said slowly, "is not a legal term." Agatha's patience snapped. "Oh, for heaven's sake! A woman is poisoned, and you're playing Scrabble with semantics." Charles stepped in smoothly. "Thank you, Blakemore. You've been discreet as always. If you happen to recall any distinguishing handwriting or, say, an address, do ring me." The solicitor's expression thawed by a millimetre. "There was a return address on one envelope, London W1, but I can't be certain it was genuine." Agatha's eyes brightened. "London W1, Fashion District, I knew it." "You knew nothing of the sort," Charles murmured as they left. "Don't quibble. It spoils the momentum." Outside, the wind had picked up, tossing Agatha's hair. She jammed on her sunglasses with more determination than necessity. "Well?" Charles asked, unlocking the car. "It proves she was being paid. The question is why? If it was blackmail, who was paying whom?" "2 lines of leverage, Charles. London money for copied designs, and village money quietly borrowed from the Sewing Circle." Clarissa sat in the middle and loved the view. "You'll turn this village into a moral laboratory if you keep poking." "Good. It needs sterilizing." They drove in companionable silence back toward Carsely. The hedgerows were dusted with early blossom, incongruously innocent. As they passed the vicarage, Agatha spotted Mrs. Bloxby emerging with a basket of laundry, her face serene as ever. "Pull over," said Agatha. Charles sighed. "Do I ever have a choice?" Mrs. Bloxby greeted them with her usual calm. "Agatha, Charles, you both look rather pleased with yourselves, or guilty." "A bit of both," said Agatha. "We've just come from Blakemore's office." The vicar's wife raised her brows but didn't comment. Instead, she gestured toward the garden bench. "You'd better sit. I was hoping to speak to you anyway. It's about Vera Lyle." Agatha froze. "What about her?" "She came to the church fund meeting yesterday and donated £50 in cash. Quite unlike her. Vera's generous with biscuits, not banknotes. She's also bought herself a new handbag. Bright green leather, very striking." Charles leaned back, amused. A handbag and a donation, clearly the wages of sin. Agatha ignored him. "You think she's hiding something?" "I think she's worried," said Mrs. Bloxby gently. "And when people are worried, they spend money to look less so." Agatha was thoughtful as they left. Vera, sweet, fluttery Vera, sitting on a pile of cash. If she was blackmailing Clarissa, that could explain the payments. "You'd better be certain before you accuse her," said Charles. "Vera faints at strong language." "I'm not accusing," said Agatha. "I'm investigating." "That's your problem. You think the two are different." That afternoon, she attempted a subtle approach. She called on Vera with a tin of scones and an expression of false innocence. "You poor thing," Agatha said. taking in Vera's tidy parlour and the unmistakable smell of fresh polish. "I thought you might fancy some company." Vera looked flustered. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, how kind. I was just— Oh my, these are lovely." "Nothing fancy," Agatha said, setting them down. Her eyes flicked to the handbag on the chair, bright green, structured, undeniably expensive. "New bag?" she asked casually. "A little treat. My aunt left me some money," Vera said quickly. Agatha gave her a long look. "You're lucky. I've never had an aunt die conveniently." Vera giggled nervously. "Oh, it wasn't recent." They drank tea. Agatha asked after the sewing circle, the weather, anything harmless. Yet Vera's fingers twitched whenever the conversation neared Clarissa's name. When Agatha mentioned the solicitor, Vera dropped her spoon with a clatter. "Heavens, what would you want with him?" "Just curiosity," said Agatha. "Clarissa seemed to think he was useful for— what's the word? Intermediaries." Vera blanched. "I don't know anything about that." "Didn't say you did," Agatha replied mildly. After an awkward silence, she finished her tea and rose. "Thank you, dear. And if you ever feel the need to confide in someone, Mrs. Bloxby's better at absolution than I am." Vera managed a watery smile. "You're very kind, Mrs. Raisin." Agatha left feeling anything but kind. Guilt prickled under her coat. She liked Vera, her fussing, her softness, her endless apologies, and yet every instinct told her the woman was hiding something. Charles phoned that evening. "You've been quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," said Agatha. Dangerous habit. Vera's lying. She's got money from somewhere. But she's too timid for real blackmail. Timid people do desperate things. Besides, she's got taste. That handbag was a good choice. "You noticed too?" "How could I not? It's visible from space." Agatha smiled despite herself. "We need proof, not handbags." "Proof requires patience." "Then you're useless," she said. "I'll find it myself." The following day brought drizzle, fine and persistent, the kind that seeps through optimism. Agatha decided a little light reconnaissance would do her good. She stationed herself at her window with binoculars, ostensibly to check the bird feeders. Hours passed. Carsely life unfolded in its usual rhythm. Postmen, dog walkers, a tractor grumbling in the distance. Then, near 5 o'clock, Vera appeared at the end of the lane, wearing her beige raincoat and clutching a small brown parcel. She paused at the postbox, glancing around before sliding it in. Agatha's pulse quickened. She waited until Vera turned the corner, then grabbed her coat and dashed out. The label on the box was visible for only a second, but it was enough. To editorial department, the Silver Scene, London W1, Roy Silver's magazine. She returned home damp and triumphant, collapsing into her armchair. The cat stared at her as if to say she'd finally gone mad. "Roy's paper," she muttered aloud. Why on earth would Vera be posting to him? At that moment, the phone rang. She snatched it up. "Aggie!" Roy's voice fizzed with excitement. "You'll never guess. We've had the most intriguing anonymous submission. Embroidery samples from a village stitcher with impeccable craftsmanship. I might feature it." Agatha sat up. "Describe the parcel." Small, brown, neat handwriting, smelled faintly of lavender. "Roy," she said slowly, "don't publish anything. Don't touch it. That parcel's part of something bigger." "Oh, darling, you sound thrillingly conspiratorial. Just promise me," she snapped. All right. But at least let me write about you as the glamorous sleuth of Carsely." She hung up. For a long moment, she sat staring at the rain trickling down the window. The threads were tightening. Clarissa's payments, Vera's cash, the postmark in London W1, and now Roy's office. It all fit too well to be coincidence. And yet she couldn't shake the discomfort that came with suspecting someone she liked. Beneath her sharpness, Agatha had a stubborn loyalty. She loathed betrayal, especially her own. That evening, Mrs. Bloxby phoned to invite her to tea, but Agatha declined. She couldn't face the gentle wisdom that always made her feel both chastened and seen. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the fire, replaying Vera's tremulous voice, her new handbag, that flicker of fear when Clarissa's name came up. Charles rang again around 9. "You sound glum," he said. "I'm thinking of giving up sleuthing," she said. "Until tomorrow morning, you mean?" Agatha smiled faintly. Vera's either a blackmailer or the world's most nervous philanthropist. Either way, I'll find out. Shall I bring champagne when you do? Bring a mop. There's always spillage. After they rang off, she switched off the lamp. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the village washed and gleaming under the streetlight. Somewhere down the lane, a post van rattled past, carrying with it the parcel that might decide Vera's fate. Agatha watched it disappear into the night, feeling the weight of her own curiosity, and somewhere underneath the uneasy tug of conscience. Tangled yarns indeed, she murmured, and I'm the fool pulling the threads. Morning sunlight glinted off puddles outside Agatha Raisin's cottage, giving the illusion that Carsely sparkled with virtue. Agatha knew better. The village was humming with gossip again, and this time she was at its centre. Her telephone had rung twice before she'd even finished her first coffee. "Aggie, darling," came Roy Silver's voice on the third ring, dripping with glee. "Before you accuse me of betrayal, let me clarify. I'm innocent. That parcel from Vera? Pure embroidery. Cross-stitch, not crime." Agatha sat straighter. "You opened it?" "Of course I did. Editorial curiosity. Gorgeous craftsmanship, darling. The woman's wasted in a village. Well, anywhere outside Soho, really." "And what did you plan to do with it?" "Feature it in my exposé on village style. Quaint handicrafts are back, you know. I was going to run it under the headline Homely Chic, from teapot to trend spot." Agatha nearly dropped the phone. "Roy, you nincompoop, that parcel could be evidence." "Evidence of what? Taste? Blackmail, maybe. Smuggling. I haven't decided yet." "Honestly, Aggie, your imagination needs a hobby. Anyway, you'll be thrilled to know I've sent the samples by same day to Bill at the station. Chain of custody and all that. Tell him I'm a saint. Now, if the police come calling, tell them I'm an innocent journalist, not an accessory." He hung up before she could retort. Agatha poured herself another coffee, muttering darkly. Roy had the survival instincts of a cockroach in a bakery. Irritating, but indestructible. Still, she was curious about that parcel. If Vera truly had sent embroidery samples, what else had she stitched into them, or hidden? Before she could ponder further, there was a sharp knock at the door. She opened it to find Bill Wong standing there, hands in his pockets, expression serious. "Morning, Agatha," he said. "We need to talk." "If this is about Roy's parcel—" "It is. You knew Vera posted something, didn't you? And you didn't tell me." Agatha's chin lifted. "I was confirming the facts first." "By having Roy open possible evidence?" "Oh, don't be so sanctimonious, Bill. He's not exactly the KGB." Bill sighed. "Agatha, we're supposed to be on the same side." "We are," she said, softening. "I just happen to be more efficient." He followed her inside, shaking rain from his coat. The cats eyed him with mild suspicion. "Wilkes is furious," Bill said. "He thinks you're obstructing the investigation." "Wilkes couldn't investigate a lost sock," said Agatha. "Anyway, what's new? Found anything useful, or are we still guessing?" Bill's mouth twitched, amusement fighting restraint. "Actually, the toxicology report came back. The foxglove wasn't processed. Fresh leaves steeped in boiling water. Homemade brew." "So, not suicide," Agatha said. "Possibly. The leaves came from her own garden." Agatha frowned. If she brewed it herself, it would have tasted vile. Foxglove tea isn't exactly chamomile. "True," said Bill, "but Wilkes says people do strange things in despair." "Clarissa Trent didn't despair. She sulked stylishly." Bill chuckled despite himself. "You've a way of describing people that should be illegal." "It's called accuracy," she said primly. A car horn sounded outside. 2 short blasts, unmistakably Charles Frayth's. Bill groaned. He times his entrances like an actor. Agatha peered through the window. "He's probably bringing news." "He's bringing trouble," said Bill. Charles entered moments later, all charm and tweed. "Morning, team. Thought I'd drop by before the day's scandal begins without me." "You're late," said Agatha. "Roy's already confessed." "Confessed to what?" Fashion enthusiasm. "He admits he opened Vera's parcel. Said it contained embroidery samples for a magazine feature." Charles perched on the armchair. "So Vera wasn't mailing blackmail notes, just stitching fame for herself?" "Don't start," said Agatha. "I'm still not convinced. She's got too much new money for someone who claims to live on jam jars." "Some people inherit," said Charles innocently. Agatha glared. "Vera inherits nerves, not cash." Bill cleared his throat. "Look, we can debate handbags later. Right now, I need to show you both something. He spread photographs on the coffee table, close-ups of Clarissa's teacup, saucer, and garden plants. The cup bore faint purple stains. That's where the foxglove residue came from, Bill said. We traced the leaves to her own garden patch. Same soil type, same pollen. So either she picked them herself or someone who knew her garden did. Could have been Vera, said Agatha. She was always helping with the charity garden rota. That's speculation, Bill warned. Everything's speculation until I'm right, said Agatha. Charles chuckled. Remind me never to commit a crime in your parish. You already have, said Agatha. You parked on the double yellows. Bill gathered the photos with a resigned sigh. Just stay out of this, Agatha. Please. Wilkes already thinks you're feeding the press. Feeding them? She said indignantly. I'm starving them. Roy doesn't count. He counts when he's on television, Bill replied. The phone rang again. Agatha snatched it up. If that's Wilkes, tell him to mind his own business, muttered Bill. It's not Wilkes, Agatha said after a pause. It's Roy. Again. He says the courier just picked up another parcel from Carsely, same handwriting, to his office. Bill straightened. From who? He didn't see, but he thinks it was Vera. That's impossible, said Charles. You told me she's been keeping to her cottage. Maybe she's found new courage, Agatha said grimly, or new fear. Bill rubbed his forehead. Right, I'll check the post office records, but for heaven's sake, don't interfere. Too late, said Agatha. He gave her a look that mixed irritation with reluctant fondness. One day you'll realize I'm trying to keep you out of trouble. And one day you'll realize that's impossible. He left, shutting the door more firmly than necessary. Charles stretched. He's fond of you, you know. He's fond of self-control, said Agatha, which you test daily. Flattery noted. They spent the next hour reviewing what they knew. Clarissa's secret payments, Vera's windfall, the foxglove tea. Agatha's mind whirred, darting between motives like a bee on espresso. Suppose Clarissa discovered Vera was posting those embroidery samples, she said. Maybe Vera wasn't just stitching pretty patterns. Maybe she was hiding designs, the stolen ones from that fashion house. So Clarissa threatens to expose her, said Charles. Vera panics, brews poison and— No, said Agatha. Too theatrical. Vera's not clever enough for poison. She'd trip over her own alibi. Then who? Someone who knew both women's weaknesses. Someone who wanted Clarissa silenced but left Vera guilty by implication. You're getting conspiratorial again, said Charles. You're getting complacent, said Agatha. Before he could answer, the phone rang once more. Agatha picked it up, expecting Roy or Bill, but Charles's mobile buzzed simultaneously. He answered his, listened, and his face shifted. That was the pub, he said, lowering the phone. Vera's gone. Agatha blinked. Gone where? Packed a suitcase, told the neighbour she was visiting family in Devon, caught the afternoon train to London instead. Agatha's pulse quickened. London W1, she murmured. The same address on those envelopes. Charles nodded. She's running. Or meeting someone. By evening, Bill rang again. CCTV showed Vera boarding the London train at Moreton-in-Marsh and getting off at Cheltenham Spa 10 minutes later, switching to a local bus. London was a feint. They exchanged a look. Equal parts excitement and apprehension. You're not suggesting we follow her, Charles said. Not tonight, said Agatha, though her mind was already racing. But tomorrow, perhaps. A day trip to London might be just what we need. For evidence or for shopping? Both. I multitask, he smiled. Bill will have kittens when he hears. Bill can knit them booties, she said. They shared a laugh, but the warmth faded quickly. Agatha stared out the window, watching dusk creep across the green. The village looked peaceful, lamplight glowing behind lace curtains, smoke curling from chimneys. Yet beneath it all, she sensed fear tightening its grip. Clarissa's death had stirred something mean in Carsely. Greed, envy, desperation. Even the sewing circle, once a harmless club of gossip and jam, now felt like a nest of secrets. Charles poured her a brandy without asking. You'll drive yourself mad, Aggie. I'm halfway there, she said softly. But I can't stop now. Not when Vera's running and foxgloves blooming in every garden. You're not responsible for everyone's sins, you know. She gave a small, weary smile. No, just the interesting ones. He raised his glass. To interesting sins, then. And to finding the truth before Wilkes arrests me for curiosity, she said, clinking it. Outside, the first stars appeared over Carsely's dark rooftops. The mystery was tightening like a thread wound too taut, and Agatha Raisin, restless and reckless as ever, was about to tug. Bill's call at dawn confirmed it. The landlady at a Cheltenham boarding house had checked in a Mrs. Vale, Vera in a beige wig. A thin drizzle hung over Cheltenham like the residue of someone else's bathwater, lukewarm, half-hearted, and faintly depressing. Agatha Raisin glared at it through the car windscreen. She'd always disliked towns that pretended to be cities. They had ideas above their station and parking below it. "Next time," she said, "we let Charles do the chasing. He's built for luxury, not legwork." Bill Wong smiled as he drove. He's also built for plausible deniability. He'd never risk a muddy car park. "And you think I enjoy it?" "Yes," said Bill mildly. Agatha harumphed but didn't argue. The address they'd been given, a boarding house near the racecourse, sounded so harmless it had to be suspicious. Vera Lyle, the trembling little sparrow of Carsely, had vanished days ago. Now, according to a chatty landlady, she was resting quietly under a false name. The house appeared precisely as Agatha expected. Lace curtains, too many potted geraniums, and a faint aroma of disinfectant and boiled cabbage. The sort of establishment where gossip came with the tea tray. Mrs. Penfold, the landlady, ushered them into a parlour overflowing with chintz. She said not to disturb her, she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Poor thing, such nerves. But if you're friends—" "We're concerned citizens," said Agatha briskly. "And her friends? Yes, sort of." Mrs. Penfold blinked but seemed too polite to inquire further. She led them upstairs, knocked and departed before the door even opened. Vera appeared, small and pale, in a dressing gown that looked older than her conscience. Her eyes widened. "Mrs. Raisin! Inspector Wong! Oh, I didn't expect—" "London's full of eyes," Vera whispered. "Cheltenham felt like no one would think to look." "No one ever does," said Agatha, stepping inside. "You've been busy disappearing. Bill and I thought we'd save you the trouble of confessing by bringing the police to you." "Agatha," murmured Bill, a warning in his tone. "Well, it's true," she said. "You've run off like a character in one of those dreary dramas about guilt. What are you hiding, Vera?" Vera's fingers twisted the belt of her gown. "It's not what you think. I didn't kill Clarissa. I swear on on my sewing machine." "Then start talking," said Agatha, "because right now you look like an embroidered alibi." Bill gestured for calm. "We just need the truth, Vera. Start from the beginning." Vera sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. "It started last year. I was short on money. The Sewing Circle sold handmade items for charity. Pot holders, tea cozies, that sort of thing. A woman from London offered to pay for designer-style pieces. Said she could sell them on. At first I thought it was harmless. Then she sent proper designer samples, ones with logos. Said to copy the stitches exactly." "You were making counterfeits," said Agatha flatly. Vera flushed. "I didn't think of it like that. It was sewing, that's all. Clarissa found out, though. She confronted me after a meeting, said she'd tell the police unless I stopped." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "And you didn't stop." "I tried, but the woman in London kept sending payments. Cash. I thought just one more batch, then I'd quit. But Clarissa said she was going to denounce the whole sewing circle at the bazaar. Said she'd already written a statement for the police." "And then she conveniently died," said Agatha. Vera's eyes filled. "You think I poisoned her, don't you?" "I didn't. I was terrified of her, yes, but I'd never—" Agatha folded her arms. "You had motive, opportunity, and access to her tea," Bill interjected gently. "Let her finish." Vera wiped her eyes. "That last meeting, Clarissa said she was going to make an example of me. But she wasn't cruel, not like people think. She said she'd give me one last day to decide. That was Tuesday. The next day, she was gone." Agatha exchanged a look with Bill. "Tuesday tea," she murmured. "What?" said Vera. "Nothing," Agatha said quickly. "Go on." "After she died, I panicked. I thought the police would find the money or the samples and think I'd killed her to keep quiet. So I ran. I'm a coward, Mrs. Raisin, not a murderer." There was such weary honesty in her voice that even Agatha hesitated. She wanted to believe her, which annoyed her immensely. Compassion always felt like a weak muscle she didn't trust to use. "If you're innocent," she said, "why lie about your aunt's inheritance, and why send that parcel to Roy's magazine?" Vera blinked. "I wanted to return the last designs, anonymously. Roy's editorials always reach London fashion circles. I thought if a glossy editor saw the stitches, he'd ask questions in the right places. I wanted the London money to dry up without my name in it." Agatha snorted. "That's the most ridiculous plan I've heard all week, and I've been listening to Charles." Bill's expression softened. "We'll need to verify your story, Vera, but if you're telling the truth, you might have saved yourself a charge of fraud." "Fraud?" she squeaked. "But I only—" "Yes, yes," said Agatha. "You only sewed, and I only interfere. We all have our vices." Bill stood. "Pack your things. I'll arrange for someone to escort you home. It's better you face this than hide." Vera nodded miserably. "You don't believe me, do you?" "Parts of you," said Agatha, "the nervous, guilty parts." They left her with promises to keep in touch, though Agatha doubted Vera would sleep that night. Outside, the drizzle had thickened to proper rain. Bill paused under an awning. "She might be telling the truth," he said. "Or she might be a liar with trembling hands," said Agatha. "Still, I don't think she killed Clarissa. Too scared to plot anything more complicated than sponge cake." "Then who?" Agatha stared out at the rain-slicked street. "Someone who used her guilt to cover their own." They drove back toward Carsely in silence, the hum of tyres filling the gaps between thoughts. Agatha felt that curious melancholy that came whenever a case stopped being amusing. Murder wasn't entertainment up close. It was inconvenient and sticky, like jam on one's conscience. At the village green, they stopped at the Red Lion. Bill needed a phone call. Agatha needed gin. Inside, the pub was warm, fire crackling, the air thick with talk of local politics and pudding recipes. Charles Fraith appeared, waving from the bar with a smile too casual to be innocent. "You're late," Agatha said. "I was gathering information," he said, handing her a drink. "Also, I like the sound of my name when the barmaid says it." "You're insufferable," she said fondly. "True, but I'm house-trained." Bill rejoined them, looking grim. "Wilkes wants Vera brought in tomorrow morning. He's convinced she's the one." "Wilkes is convinced gravity is a communist plot," said Agatha. "Don't listen to him." Bill rubbed his temple. "Then give me something better, a new suspect, because right now, Vera's the only one who fits." Agatha glanced into her glass, seeing the firelight ripple across the surface like a taunt. Clarissa threatened to expose the sewing circle at the bazaar. That's the motive we've been missing. Not money, reputation. Half the village was involved in those fundraising parcels. Charles frowned. "You think they were all in on the counterfeiting?" "Not knowingly, but Mrs. Dimmock handled the shipments. If anyone tampered with them—" Bill cut in. "Careful, Agatha, you're guessing again." "I'm deducing," she said sharply. "From gossip." "From experience," she retorted. They might have continued bickering had Mrs. Bloxby not appeared by the door, shaking off her umbrella. "There you are," she said warmly. "I heard you were back. You'll be wanting to hear the latest." Agatha sighed. "Go on then. What now?" "Vera phoned me," Mrs. Bloxby said. "She sounded calmer, said she was grateful for your visit, but she's still frightened. Apparently she found something among her things she swears she didn't pack." "What sort of something?" asked Bill. "A spool of thread, blue, a different make from Vera's usual, the same brand as Clarissa's twin set from her rack. She said it looked expensive, like silk." Agatha's heart gave a peculiar jolt. "Blue?" Mrs. Bloxby nodded. "Yes, the same shade Clarissa used for that unfinished embroidery piece." Charles gave a low whistle. "That's rather damning." "Or planted," said Agatha quickly. "It's too neat. Vera's being set up." "By whom?" asked Bill. "That's what I intend to find out." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, the crackle of the fire filling the gap. Then Agatha stood abruptly, fishing for her coat. "Where are you going?" Charles asked. "Home, to think." "Dangerous pastime." "Yes, but someone has to do it." Outside, the rain had eased to a fine mist, the sort that blurred the outlines of things. Agatha walked home through the quiet lanes, the smell of damp earth mingling with chimney smoke. The village windows glowed like cautious eyes. Back in her cottage, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed into her chair. The cats climbed onto her lap with the calm entitlement of creatures who trusted her more than she trusted herself. She poured a small whiskey and replayed the day in her mind: Vera's pale face, Bill's disappointment, Charles's easy charm. And somewhere amid it all, that blue spool of silk thread gleamed like a mocking clue. "Too perfect," she murmured, like something Mrs. Dimmock would call divine providence. She reached for her notebook and wrote a single line. Clarissa planned to denounce someone who profited most from her silence. Then, under it, she added another: check Dimmock's shipment records. The clock chimed 10. Outside, the drizzle resumed, steady and unhurried, as though nature itself were stitching the night together. Agatha leaned back, her expression softening. She thought of Vera's trembling hands and of the strange tenderness that guilt sometimes provoked. Perhaps she was getting sentimental in her old age, or merely tired of cynicism. "We'll sort it, love," she murmured to the cats, who purred in sleepy agreement. Then, half aloud, she added, "Every pattern unravels eventually. You just have to pull the right thread." The morning of the Carsely Charity Bazaar dawned with deceptive brightness, the sort of sunshine that looks cheerful but feels like a reprimand. Agatha Raisin stood outside the parish hall, arms crossed, surveying the bunting that fluttered gamely in the breeze. Inside, the villagers were already fussing with tables, raffle tickets and jam jars, oblivious to the fact that they were about to attend a murder trap disguised as a social event. "You look pleased with yourself," said Charles Fraith, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee. "That means someone's about to be humiliated." Agatha took a cup. "If all goes well, only the guilty will be. I've arranged a little display to flush her out." "Her?" "Don't play dense, Charles. Mrs. Dimmock. All that piety was bound to conceal something. Clarissa discovered she was siphoning funds from the Sewing Circle's charity account. That blue silk thread, her vanity, imported stuff. She used it for her personal projects, I'll bet." "And you think she killed Clarissa to stop her gossiping?" "Not gossiping, confessing. Clarissa was going to expose her at the bazaar that never happened. She'd drafted a statement naming your temporary loans from the Sewing Circle, and the Tuesday tea was when she planned to hand it to Bill." "So this," he said, gesturing to the decorated hall, "is your grand reconstruction." Agatha smiled. "Complete with props." She slipped inside, the air thick with the mingled smells of sponge cake, flowers and nerves. Mrs. Dimmock stood at the raffle table, her posture saintly, her smile tightly fastened. Beside her, Vera arranged tea towels with an air of penance, while Mrs. Blocksby floated between them like Switzerland in a floral dress. Agatha had chosen her battlefield carefully. On the centre table, among the raffle prizes, a box of chocolates, a bottle of sherry, and a crocheted cushion, sat a small sewing basket with the blue silk spool tucked inside, gleaming innocently. She'd planted it an hour ago while pretending to help. Bill Wong arrived just as the first guests filtered in, his plainclothes attempt at blending with the villagers betrayed only by the sharpness of his eyes. "You're sure about this?" he murmured. "As sure as I ever am," said Agatha. "Watch her hands. The guilty always give themselves away by touching what they shouldn't." "You've missed your calling," said Bill. "You'd make a terrifying schoolteacher." "Don't tempt me." The raffle began with Mrs. Blocksby's gentle voice calling numbers. The crowd murmured, ticket stubs rustling. Agatha waited, pulse quickening, while Mrs. Dimmock hovered, fussing with the display like a hen guarding eggs. Then it happened. A small child reached for the sewing basket, drawn by the shiny thread. Mrs. Dimmock's hand shot out faster than instinct, snatching the basket. "That's not a toy," she snapped, clutching it to her chest. The hall fell silent. Even the bunting seemed to hold its breath. Agatha stepped forward, her tone deceptively mild. "My, you're protective of raffle prizes, Mrs. Dimmock, especially ones you didn't donate." Mrs. Dimmock blinked, her knuckles whitening around the basket. "It's simply valuable. We mustn't let sticky fingers spoil it." "Valuable indeed," Agatha said. "Custom-dyed silk thread, the same kind found on Clarissa Trent's sewing table. You wouldn't know where she bought it, would you?" I can't recall." "Perhaps because it came from your sewing box," said Agatha. "You left it there when you went to visit her that day." Clarissa must have noticed the spool. She was precise about her materials. It's how she realized you'd been using the Sewing Circle funds for personal indulgences. She planned to expose you at this very bazaar. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Dimmock's expression cracked. Outrage warred with fear. "That's absurd. "I would never." "Wouldn't you?" Agatha pressed. "Clarissa threatened your reputation, your place on every parish committee. You brewed her tea, as you often did, and slipped in a touch of foxglove from her own garden. After all, no one suspects the pious, do they?" "Stop it!" Mrs. Dimmock's voice broke. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," said Agatha quietly now. "Tell us what happened." The room seemed to tilt around them. Mrs. Dimmock's composure dissolved like sugar in rain. She sank onto a chair, the basket slipping from her lap. "She said she'd ruin everything," she whispered. "That I'd cheated the church, the charities, everyone. I only borrowed the money to replace what my husband lost. He was always hopeless with investments. Clarissa said she'd tell the vicar, the police. I begged her to wait. She laughed, not cruelly, but like I was beneath pity. I only meant to frighten her." "With poison?" said Bill, stepping forward. "Just a little," she said weakly. "I'd read it could make someone faint. I thought she'd learn humility. I never meant for her to die." "But she did," said Agatha. Mrs. Dimmock covered her face. "When she collapsed, I panicked. I wiped the cup and ran. I told myself it was God's will, but—" She broke off, sobbing. The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. The villagers stared, not at a villain, but at a woman they'd known for years, now unmasked as fragile and foolish. Bill nodded to a constable waiting near the door. "We'll need to take a statement, Mrs. Dimmock." She rose slowly, dazed, as if the room were too bright. Mrs. Bloxby murmured a prayer under her breath, while Vera began to cry softly. Agatha felt no triumph, only a strange pity. It was the same look she'd seen on too many faces in her London PR days. People undone by vanity, desperate to appear better than they were. When Bill returned a few minutes later, clipboard in hand, he gave Agatha a look that was almost admiring. "You were right about the thread. Her fingerprints are on the teacup too. For once Wilkes will have to admit you cracked it." "He'll hate that," said Agatha. "He already does." They both laughed quietly, the tension breaking at last. The hall, however, was no longer the scene of a cosy village fete, but a whispering amphitheatre of scandal. Mrs. Dimmock had been escorted out, the raffle forgotten, the cakes untouched. The villagers huddled in gossiping clusters, their shock tinged with fascination. "You realise," said Charles, sidling up with a glass of wine someone had abandoned, "you've single-handedly turned a bazaar into a murder mystery matinee. You should charge admission." "I'd rather charge for peace and quiet," Agatha muttered. "Then you're in the wrong village." Before she could reply, the door burst open and Roy Silver swept in, trailed by a photographer and enough ego to fill the nave of St. Mary's. "Aggie," he cried, camera flash already snapping, "you look divine. Tell me everything. The confession, the scandal, the moral decay. Oh, this'll make marvellous copy for my village exposés column." "Roy," said Agatha dangerously, "if you print one word without my approval, I'll have you strangled with bunting." "It's a working title," he said, undeterred. "The Seamstress of Sin, or perhaps Murder by Hemline." "Out," said Agatha. "But out." Roy retreated, muttering about censorship and wasted artistry. Bill hid a smile behind his notepad. "Do you ever get tired of drama?" he asked. "Not when I'm winning," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. He studied her for a moment. "You know, you were right. She wasn't evil, just frightened." "Frightened people are the worst," said Agatha softly. "They'll do anything to feel safe again." Mrs. Bloxby joined them, serene amid the chaos. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said. "Yes," said Agatha, "and sometimes through raffles." The three of them shared a faint, weary smile. By evening the parish hall had emptied. The tables stood bare, the bunting drooped like wilted flowers. Outside, the press vans lingered, and Agatha could hear Roy charming a television crew. Charles appeared once more, car keys twirling. "Come on," he said. "Let's escape before you're drafted for interviews. I'll take you to dinner. Champagne, gossip, no talk of thread." Agatha hesitated. The idea tempted her, the gleam of candlelight, Charles's lazy wit, the chance to feel celebrated instead of complicated. But she shook her head. "Not tonight. I'm not in the mood for bubbles." "You? Refusing champagne? This is serious." "Maybe I'm tired of seeing how thin the line is between pride and stupidity." He gave her a look of quiet respect. "You've got more heart than you pretend, Aggie." "Don't spread that around," she said. He grinned. "Dinner another night, then." Maybe, she said, though she doubted it. As he left, the last of the daylight faded. Agatha lingered by the raffle table, tracing a finger along the edge of the abandoned sewing basket. The blue thread gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. Such a small, beautiful thing to have caused such misery. She thought of Clarissa, brilliant and vain, of Vera, frightened and foolish, of Mrs. Dimmock, pious and desperate. The sewing circle had been a mirror of the village itself, stitched together with secrets and self-deception. Bill approached quietly. "Wilkes has signed off. Dimmock confessed everything. You can relax now." "Relaxation's overrated," said Agatha. "So's guilt," he said gently. She looked at him, surprised by the warmth in his tone. "You're getting sentimental, Bill." "Occupational hazard. Good night, Agatha." When he was gone, she stood alone in the hall, listening to the faint creak of the rafters and the far-off hum of a village talk, already twisting the day's events into legend. Finally, she switched off the lights. The hall plunged into quiet shadow, save for one window pane glinting faintly, the last thread of blue catching the moonlight. Agatha stepped out into the cool night, pulling her coat close. The air smelled of rain and roses, the Cotswolds settling back into peace as if nothing had happened. Another mystery solved, she muttered to herself, and not a soul learned a thing from it. Yet, walking home through the darkened lanes, she couldn't quite suppress a smile. For all its folly and vanity, Carsely remained hers, the one place where she could be both exasperated and alive. And though she would never admit it, she found that strangely comforting. It was a fine April morning in Carsely, the sort that promised spring but still carried a whisper of winter in its breath. The hedgerows were greening, daffodils bobbed in the churchyard, and the scandal of the sewing circle had finally begun to fade into something that could be spoken of without wincing. Agatha Raisin sat in her cottage kitchen, the sunlight making patterns across the scrubbed table, and told herself she was entirely at peace. She didn't believe it for a second. Peace, in Agatha's experience, was merely boredom dressed up as virtue. Still, there was a certain satisfaction in knowing Mrs. Dimmock was awaiting trial. Vera had returned to her little house with dignity intact. The new handbag went back to the shop, and her £50 reappeared in the church tin, with a note of apology, and Clarissa's name had been added to the villagers' collective sigh of moral lessons learned. Carsely always bounced back. Gossip was the local form of compost. It enriched everything eventually. The kettle whistled, and she poured the tea with brisk precision. Mrs. Bloxby was due at any moment, bringing scones and, inevitably, forgiveness. Agatha both admired and resented her for it. A knock came, gentle and punctual. Mrs. Bloxby entered with a smile and a wicker basket. "How lovely your roses look," she said, glancing at the crimson blooms on the sideboard. Agatha sniffed. "They're from Charles. He's developing a sentimental streak, which is worrying." "He admires you, dear." "He admires anyone who's alive and female," said Agatha, "but he did enclose a note." Mrs. Bloxby lifted an eyebrow. "May I ask what it said?" Agatha passed it over, trying to sound offhand. "To the sharpest needle in Carsely. Ridiculous man." "Still," said Mrs. Bloxby, reading it, "not inaccurate." Agatha felt an involuntary flush. "He's just gloating because I solved it. Men can't stand competence in women unless it comes with an apron." "Or a touch of compassion," said Mrs. Bloxby gently. Agatha gave her a mock glare. "You're suggesting I'm heartless." "Only selectively." They both laughed, and the tension melted like sugar in tea. Mrs. Bloxby poured herself a cup. "It was a dreadful business, really. Poor Mrs. Dimmock. Pride does terrible things." "Pride and silk thread," said Agatha. She thought no one would notice a few pounds gone astray, and look what it cost her. Vanity stitched that whole mess together. "We're all vain in our ways," said Mrs. Bloxby. "Even you, Agatha." "Nonsense, I'm merely confident." "Confident enough to colour your hair twice a month." "That's maintenance, not vanity," Agatha protested, though she smiled. A comfortable silence settled, punctuated by the tick of the kitchen clock and the distant cooing of pigeons. "Bill's due to pop in," said Agatha after a while. "Apparently he's bringing news. I assume Wilkes is being promoted to plague another county." Mrs. Bloxby's smile deepened. "Or perhaps Bill is. If he's clever, he'll transfer somewhere with fewer committees." A few minutes later, Bill Wong appeared at the door, bearing a paper bag and his usual expression of tired amusement. "Morning, ladies," he said. "Brought doughnuts. Don't say I never give you anything, Agatha." "You never give me peace," she replied. "That's because you'd only ruin it." He set the bag down and accepted a cup of tea from Mrs. Blocksby. "So," said Agatha, settling back, "what's this mysterious news?" Bill grinned. "Wilkes is off to headquarters in Gloucester, which means I'll be acting inspector for a while." Agatha's face lit up. "Congratulations, though of course you'll miss his charm." "Yes," said Bill dryly, "the charm of a dental drill." "You'll do well," said Mrs. Blocksby kindly. "You always listen before you judge. That's rare." "And you," Agatha added, "owe your meteoric rise to my unpaid detective work." "Naturally," said Bill. "I'll put you in my acknowledgments if I ever write my memoirs. Agatha Raisin, the bane and blessing of Carsely Constabulary." Agatha smirked. "I'll hold you to that." They talked a while about the village, Vera's newfound humility, the bazaar's funds restored, and the way the Sewing Circle had dissolved overnight, its members now joining the flower rota instead. "And the W1 trail?" Agatha asked. Bill smiled. "Met traced it to a drop address used by a small copying racket. No link to the murder. Vera gives a statement, pays a fine, and keeps her needles." "No one's quite the same," said Mrs. Blocksby. "Even gossip sounds gentler." "That won't last," said Agatha. "Give them a fortnight and someone will misplace a pudding spoon or seduce a vicar." "Speaking of vicars," said Bill, rising, "I'd best check the churchyard gate. It's been vandalized again." "Crime never sleeps," said Agatha. "Neither do you," he replied, and left with a grin. Mrs. Blocksby followed soon after, leaving behind the faint scent of lavender and resin. The cottage grew quiet again, save for the cats padding in to claim her lap. Agatha looked at the roses, rich and fragrant, and picked up Charles's note once more. For all her protests, she tucked it discreetly between the pages of a gardening book. A woman could be sentimental in private. Outside, the sky had clouded over, softening into that familiar Cotswold grey. It suited her better than sunshine. You could see more clearly without glare. She carried the teapot to the sink and noticed a flyer tucked through the letterbox. In bright, cheerful letters it read, "Join the Cotswold Cooking Club. Fun, friendship, and flavour." Agatha groaned aloud. Oh no, not another circle. The cats blinked at her in shared disapproval. "That's all I need," she muttered. "Murder by marzipan." Still, she placed the flyer neatly on the counter. Experience had taught her that curiosity was a disease she would never recover from. As the kettle began to whistle again, she glanced out the window. The rain had returned, soft, insistent, familiar, stitching the village back together, thread by patient thread. Agatha smiled faintly, poured another cup, and raised it in a private toast to vanity, victory, and the next inevitable disaster. "To Carsely," she said, "may it never be dull." The kettle clicked off. Somewhere in the distance a church bell chimed the hour, and in the little cottage on Lilac Lane, Agatha Raisin, scourge of gossip and reluctant heroine of domestic crime, leaned back in her chair, watching the steam rise like a curtain before the next act.